All right, well, thank you for that introduction, and I wholeheartedly endorse exactly what he said. And at the risk of sounding like an idiot, fighting you may die. Right? So, like what he said. So, and I say, if not you, who? If not now, then when? And a lot of you come up to me today, and you've told me what you're doing, how you've saved precincts in Transylvania County, how you've organized canvassing in your counties. You're actually putting action behind the things that you believe in, and which is the whole point of this. So it does me no good to fill you full of information, and we will absolutely put some information downrange. Because you may not know this. You may know that I was an Army intelligence officer, but I was also a ranger. I was a PowerPoint ranger. So I can create slides with the best of them, right, Melody? I've hidden about 438 slides for you, but you will engage with the top 10%. And I mean that. So we are going to take a call shortly for volunteers. But I want to thank you all for your attendance. And I want to thank you for what you are going to be doing in the future. Who has a plan to become involved when you leave this place, if you're not already? Good. Every single hand ought to be up. Okay, and that doesn't have to be election related. That can be pro-life related. That can be medical freedom related. That can be anything that drives you, anything that you can use your God-given skill set to further these causes that we believe in. This series is called Behind the Election Integrity Curtain. And it kicked off, and James Charles Phillips was there with me the first time we had this conversation at a small church in Mississippi, a state that is not really rampant with election fraud. Well, it may be for years, but the trends of what I measure were not indicative of widespread fraud in 2020, but it was full of people who were wanting to know, what can I do? I'm 73 and I've never done anything before. What can I do? You know, I just got out of college. What can I do? It feels like everybody my age doesn't care. And people raising their hand and pledging their honor to go out and make things happen. So apparently we're in the South. Is this the South? Because I grew up in Mississippi. I'm not from there anymore. And James Charles and I were driving down the road kind of debating, is this really the South? And of course the conversation goes around to, you know, which of the Carolinas is the better Carolina, North or South Carolina? Of course you guys all have that opinion. You're from North Carolina. And obviously, we had the conversation. There's tons of universities around here, and they produce a certain kind of voter, supposedly. But look, I think that we all need to set aside these grudges that we have towards other colleges. Because earlier today, as you guys were filing in here, thieves broke into the library in Chapel Hill at UNC, and they cleaned it out. Okay, they cleaned everything out. So you need to keep your neighbors at UNC in your prayers, because they took both books, including one that hadn't been colored in yet. Now, you can use that joke. You can plug and play. It's a really flexible joke. You can use NC State. You can use Duke. Don't use the other variations of that. That's the least threatening one. All right, so I want you guys to know we're going to talk a lot about numbers. I think my specialty is, and if you know that, who saw me at the Cyber Symposium for the first time? Any day one Lynn Wood threw me out on Twitter followers out there? Because if you are, you're like those people that said, I'm a day one Trump supporter when he came down the escalator. So my social media presence is a bit of a legend in a way. I was relatively unknown in these circles, even though I'd been working with General Flynn, Sidney Powell, and Lynn Wood and others beginning in November. And all my numbers, most of these numbers I'm going to show you, I knew in November as we were building out these lawsuits, which of course were thrown out without a single witness called forward. Who remembers that? That was pretty irritating, wasn't it? And what happened was I went to Ohio in late December when things weren't really looking so good. This was about a week before January 6th. And I met up with a video guy named Doug Wade, who's a patriot from the Dayton, Ohio area. And we met up and we filmed something like this. This is complex numbers made simple, aimed at a small fraction of our population. So you guys, a show of hands, who thinks the national election was rigged? That's everybody. And by the way, if you're here as a guest to someone and you don't think it was rigged, I'm glad that you're here. And I welcome your skepticism. And I think that you'll probably believe it was rigged in about 20 minutes. Who thinks the election, the 2020 election, the whole ticket, who thinks it was clean? Who thinks North Carolina's election was filthy? Yeah. So I advised General Flynn in November to tell President Trump to call for a challenge and audit of the results in North Carolina, because that puts skin in the game. We won North Carolina, but I'm going to tell you that I didn't win it by 1 point. I won it by 8 points. And this is what we're going to go after. And I thought that would have been a pretty good play, an aggressive play. It didn't happen. But after this interview with Doug Wade, aimed at the people who are your tax cut Republicans who don't like mean tweets, and now they have to deal with all these other issues, General Flynn got hold of this interview. I sent it over to him, 20 minutes. And it was really my first widespread interview. And he still had Twitter, 1.2 million followers. And he texts me and he's like, hey, I need you to send me Doug Wade's Twitter handle and send me your Twitter handle. And I'm like, well, what's a Twitter handle? And I said, I don't have one. And he said, well, how the hell do you expect me to tweet out your interview if you don't have a Twitter handle? So lo and behold, @SKeschel was born on Twitter. And one General Flynn tweet later, with a retweet by Sidney Powell and a retweet by Lynn Wood, I had 60,000 followers in about 36 hours. So that led to a bunch of people who, I've been on Twitter for 12 years and I've only got 300. Who is this guy? He doesn't follow anybody. And then there were people that thought I was Q, which was really bizarre. I mean, I must have heard that 17 times. And lo and behold, about a week later, General Flynn was banned off of Twitter, which led to a text exchange where I said, hey, sir, I never imagined that after only a week I'd have more Twitter followers than you. So we razz each other pretty hard, and James Charles will attest to that. And he never calls me sir in these public settings. Right, James Charles? Where are you? I'm sure you're back there somewhere. All right, so we're going to get into these numbers, and we're going to ask for volunteers, and we're going to go over 3 key counties in North Carolina. Of course, these are local. Some of you have been to events already this week. We had one in Mecklenburg County and another one yesterday over in Wake County in Raleigh. So we're going to talk about New Hanover County. Is anybody from the coast? Okay, so I would like for somebody to volunteer to head up the New Hanover research team. Any hands out there? I'm gonna volunteer somebody. Okay, I see you right there. And so when we get to your point, I'll prompt you on this, and you're gonna come up here and we're gonna do a little interview. So you're New Hanover. All right. How about this county, Guilford County? Volunteer, anybody? I'm gonna volunteer someone right here in the front. Okay, right here in the front, Guilford County, and then finally, the big one that we're gonna talk about is not too far from here. We're gonna talk about Wake County. I'm going to show you what's going on in Wake County. Can I get a volunteer for Wake County? Melody, what do you think? Where are you at? Yeah. Pawn it off. All right, I see you waving your arm. You're Wake County. Congratulations. So before we get into North Carolina, the importance of this is to arm you with information, because you don't need to convince the people in the crowd. They already agree the national election is compromised. The Electoral College was decided by fraud. But you need to go out. You have 30% of the population that'll probably spit in your face and would never believe in election fraud, even if this current administration admitted to it at a podium. 20% of the population is still out there, and I would like to alert you to the fact, does anybody read opposition media every now and again, just to get an idea of what they do? I know Steve Bannon does it. That's why he's so sly. But CNN had an article the other day, and they call it the big lie. So 2 people call this situation the big lie. We call it the big lie in that it was a stolen election. They call it the big lie to refer to the claims of us saying it's a stolen election. So it's people pointing in one big giant circular firing squad. But CNN ran an article a couple days ago saying it looks like the big lie is winning. And they started out saying how great and massively huge Biden's win was, but 52% of Americans don't have confidence in the election system, which I found interesting because this is CNN. This is their poll that they sponsored, 52%, and they admitted that. So what election do you think we're talking about? You think we're talking about the 2014 midterms? I think they're probably talking about the biggest election that everybody has been talking about for 10 months. More people believe today in a stolen election than they did in November, which to me is astounding because we were all sitting there with our mouth wide open on November the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and however long they counted. They counted for 9 days here, did they? 52% in a CNN poll. I can imagine their numbers probably came back closer to 60. And they shaved it down to 52%. So you have a situation in this republic where more than half of the country has lost faith in the system of elections, which is how we decide, how we self-govern, how we pick people to represent us. If you don't think that's a crisis, then I suggest you look at history, and I also suggest you pick up a book called The Fourth Turning. Fourth Turning, Turning, and you're going to see an 80-year cycle that is right in the middle of where we are today. Well, we're at the 80 years, not in the middle. So we're at a crisis point. And what we do from this point forward is going to impact the kind of world that we continue to live in, what the children behind us are going to inherit, and what their children behind them are going to be dealing with and cleaning up. So there is no longer room for you to sit on the couch. Everybody has to be involved. So to that precinct chairman that just made a phone call and became a precinct chair, I commend you. Because I can fly all over the place talking about a few counties in each state, but unless there is an army at the county level, this is futile. Are we clear on that? So we're going to talk about the national scene, 5 key points. These come from an article that General Flynn and I co-authored that was published in the Western Journal just before the Cyber Symposium. And it was 10 key points, irrefutable points of the 2020 election. You can throw these at anybody and they will absolutely choke on them. They are irrefutable points. I'm going to give you the top 5 because I want you to be able to bounce these off people when they say, well, there's no evidence or there's not even an inkling or a shred that suggests there was election fraud. And we're going to go into number 1. Did my clicker die off on us here? We have a deep state attack going on. All right, good. We're working again. Who's heard me talk about bellwether counties? Bellwether counties. I did a short video on this before I discovered something called Telegram. Bellwethers. This slide gets into every one of my slideshows, and it's pretty much forced in there. Mrs. K made this slide, so it's in there. And the word bellwether comes from England, and it refers to a bell placed around the neck of a ram leading a flock of sheep. So if I'm a shepherd up here on this makeshift stage and I hear a jingle, jingle, jingle going this way, then it's telling me that the flock of sheep is heading this way. And I can pretty much tell based on that bell what's going on. So we're talking about leading indicators of a final election outcome. It's kind of like when somebody wakes up in a bad mood, coffee doesn't taste very good, bad news on the paper, and you kind of have a bellwether showing you that it might be a long day. Politically speaking, we have bellwether counties. Now, before I jump to the next slide, keep in mind bellwether counties can die off. So Vigo County, Indiana is a great example of an active bellwether county. If you knew this little life hack, Vigo County since 1956 has aligned with the ultimate winner of every election. That is correlated to the movement of the working class. Now, in that case, this is the white working class. And if it's strong for Republicans, it shows Republican strength in these states that are going to decide the election, like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan. And of course, when it moves back to the left, it's showing strength for the Democrats and the working class. But these bellwethers can die off. Some of them died off in 2016. So if you had bellwethers in North Carolina that 20 years ago, this is a much more rural state than it is today. You might have had a county like Guilford that was much more competitive. So if a Republican would have won Guilford County, and then over time it becomes more academic, becomes more white collar, more population comes in and it changes the structure of what makes up the voting population, then you may have something fall off of bellwether status. These counties, 19 counties since 1980, have been perfect in aligning with the winner of our presidential elections. In 2016, President Trump carried all 19. And in 2020, he carried 18 of 19, with the exception of Clallam County in Washington, which I can assure you, based on my research in Washington, Biden did not legitimately carry that county. President Trump carried all 19 of these in 2016, and he certainly did it again in 2020. President Obama had all 19 both times, so on and so forth, all the way back to Reagan in 1980. Did any of you vote for Ronald Reagan in 84 re-election campaign? Well, you voted for Reagan's re-election about a week before I was born. So thank you. These counties are mostly aligned in your working class states. So this is the Trump belt up here, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. You can see in Ohio, you can see that the working class vote tends to shift the deciding factor in your elections. Okay, fine. Well, these counties are going to die off. Well, this is no longer valid. It's not causation, it's correlation. Okay, fine. I'll present you another factor, bellwether states. You have a clue on the screen in front of you. Anybody want to belt out some well-known bellwether states? All right, how about another one? All right, Ohio and Florida. I heard both of those. Those are the two biggest ones that people talk about. Bellwether states can die off individually. I personally believe Ohio is becoming a red state, even though it's aligned with the winner of every presidential election since 1896, all but twice. I think Pennsylvania may be becoming Ohio, legitimately. But George W. Bush was the first Republican to win the presidency without carrying Illinois or Vermont. So this is 20 years ago, but we don't associate Illinois or Vermont with Republican voting. So these things can die off at the individual level. But when we talk about how our electoral college is set up, it's set up, the founders envisioned the electoral college to encourage building coalitions. If we didn't have the electoral college system, the presidential candidates would spend time in New York, Florida, Texas, California. They may come here for a quick stop, given that this is one of the 10 largest states in the country. But they're going to pass over Kentucky. They're going to pass over Oregon. They're going to pass over smaller states like New Mexico. I don't think I know anybody from New Mexico that's, oh, sorry, professor's from there. He's going to rig me on that one. But look, these are 4 states, a coalition of states, including your state. When they all 4 go to the winner, since 1896, these are 13 out of 13 times correct in predicting the winner. And that would be Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, and Florida. So to repeat that, since 1896, I doubt any of you were around in 1896, even though some people from 1896 did vote in North Carolina this past election. By mail, of course, they vote by mail. It's just easier to cast a ballot like that than it is to actually get up out of the crypt and go vote. 1896, 13 times these 4 states have gone to the same candidate, and every time it has been predictive of a win. President Trump carried all 4 of those in 2016, and he carried all 4 again in 2020. But for the first time in 124 years, these 4 together did not align with the winner. That's pretty interesting. So why are these 4 important? What is strong about this coalition? This is a coalition that represents white and black, Hispanic and Asian, blue collar, white collar, suburban, rural unions, everyone in between, especially North Carolina and Florida as they become more populated. This is an interesting one to me, and I don't think that anybody I've presented this to can accurately explain away the uniqueness of that miss. Primary vote. Who voted for Trump in the primaries last year? What was going on in primary time, March, April, May of 2020? Coronavirus was out. And this was in a day and age where a lot of people who were awake to the issue of coronavirus were kind of concerned about it. So it was too dangerous to go vote. You might pull a lever or push a button and get coronavirus on your finger. But still, millions of people, millions and millions and millions of people poured out of their homes to go vote for President Trump. What's unique about that is that there was no valid contender to the nomination. Unless you think Bill Weld was a valid contender, which I would question your thought process on that, to say the least. But President Trump had millions upon millions of votes, people coming out just to cast a primary vote for Trump. And I'd like to show you this slide. Since 1912, There were also voters that were born in 1912 who voted in North Carolina. They were absolutely descendants of their 1896 born ancestors. These are the 4 presidents who made it through primaries. These began in 1912, who lost the ensuing general election. I would say lost re-election, but one of these, Gerald Ford, he was never elected, so he was obviously trying to win the presidency for the first time. But these are the 4 who made it through a primary and lost. Herbert Hoover, who was presiding over the Great Depression. Gerald Ford, who came after Watergate, which Watergate looks like a stolen pencil sharpener compared to the scandals of today. And Jimmy Carter, which I don't think we need to talk about Jimmy. And Bush 41. So Bush 41, of course, was famous for read my lips, no new taxes. And he also came after 3 consecutive Republican terms, which is the only time since the end of World War II a party has won 3 consecutive terms in the White House. So naturally, the political tides are moving away from Republicans. And this percentage underneath each of the candidates, for those of you in the back who may not be able to see, Hoover had 36% of the primary vote, Ford at 53%, Carter at 51%, and Bush at just under 73%. So Bush is the highest share of primary vote to lose a following election. Why do you guys think that a low share of the primary vote is ominous for your general election chances? Enthusiasm. We heard about Trump's enthusiasm gap over Biden. These elections are decided by very tight margins in the Electoral College. President Obama, even though he had a ton of electoral votes, over 330 electoral votes in his reelection, only won reelection by about 600,000 votes in 5 states. President Trump won his first election by 78,000 votes in 3 states. These are close elections. So if you have a significant portion of the base who is not interested in your candidacy, so Ford ran against Ronald Reagan and only got 53%, and he lost. So if you have a couple percent that are not down with your candidacy, they are going to absolutely tip the balance in the Electoral College. Now, here are 3 Republican presidents who had very strong primary numbers, and I'm going to tell you about how they did in a re-election. Eisenhower at 86%. In 1956, he went on to win 41 states. Nixon had 87% in 72. He went on to win 49 states. And Reagan was at 99%, which is incredible. And he won 49 states. The highlight of my time at Sioux Falls was having Mike Lindell sitting there on the side of the stage, looking like he was inspecting the deck of a ship. And I said, "Hey, Mike, you know what state Eisenhower and Nixon won?" And he goes, "Minnesota." So I came up with that game right before I went on the stage, and I converted it 3 times. So I was a little bit proud of myself. This is what it looks like when a Republican is strong. So George Bush also had strong primary numbers, but he had a very weak reelection because the Republican brand was wearing out. Now, does anyone know what Donald Trump's share of the primary vote was last year? 94%. So here we have a tremendous primary showing for President Trump, even though you were told that he's losing suburban women. I bet we have a lot of suburban women here. So one thing I've been told about suburban women is that you hate secure borders. You hate industry that works on behalf of this country's workers. You hate the stopping of trafficking and of humans and opioids. So you obviously oppose conservative populism. 94%. One thing that I did not show you on a slide is we need to talk about the other side. You may remember how Biden did in the primaries early on, right? There are 3 key primaries for the Democrats are Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. Nevada is very important for measuring working class strength of minorities, especially out in the West, so they can hold down Colorado and potentially compete in Arizona and Texas, and obviously blow their numbers out in California. Biden was almost non-viable in Iowa and New Hampshire, and he was crushed in Nevada. And his running mate, of course, didn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses. So how do you have 81 million votes for a duo like that? It's a little bit curious. Incumbent vote gain. There's the 1890s back at us again. Since 1892, no incumbent president has gained votes and lost re-election. You can see here on this graph, there are 3 campaigns since 1900 that lost votes and won re-election. FDR had that happen 2 campaigns in a row where he lost votes from the previous election and still won. And of course, President Obama. You need to understand this because it's going to factor into the North Carolina information. President Obama was one of the weakest incumbents in the history of the presidency. He lost almost 4 million votes nationwide. And because the Republicans nominated Mitt Romney, who had no traction with the working classes, they were not able to capitalize on his losses, Obama's losses. Now we have some very tall piles here. Look at Nixon in 72. He's up over 15 million votes from 1968. And the reason for that is because George Wallace was in the field in 68 and he took electoral votes in the South. He's the last third-party candidate to win electoral votes. And when he was out of the field in 72, you have a consolidation towards Nixon running against a far-left socialist 50 years ago, which absolutely impacted the electorate. Bush in 04, 2000 was a very low turnout election, so you won't see 2000 analyzed in my North Carolina slides. 2004 was the last year both parties made substantial gains nationwide, and that included Bush, who was up about 12 million votes. And then Donald Trump in 2020 was up 11 million votes to 74 million votes. This is a reconsolidation of the lost conservative votes to the third parties in 2016, but also the conversion of many voters who never thought about voting Republican before. That may include some of you out there. Anybody? Come on, somebody clap. Please clap. That's the only time you'll ever hear me quote Jeb Bush. U.S. House elections. I like this phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. Are you familiar with that one? You would think that a decent electoral college victory, a 306 to 232 and a 4% popular vote win with that kind of turnout would yield strong returns for the Democrats down ballot. They might say that a president like that or president-elect like that carries pretty good coattails. Here are three recent landslides. Here you see Reagan in 1980. And then again in 84, and we have Obama in 08. And you can see down on the bottom the corresponding U.S. House seat gain. This is a net number for the president-elect. And that is Reagan with 34 seats. The Republicans picked up 34 seats. This is a day and age where the Republicans were the minority in the U.S. House for 40 years. That's a humongous gain. 16 pulled back from the midterm losses of 82 in his reelection. And then Obama, he carried 21 seats with him into the White House. And of course, he won North Carolina in 2008, or so we're told. Does anybody remember that? Now, Joe Biden. Anybody know how many seats the Democrats netted in the U.S. House in 2020? Minus 13. I find that one extremely peculiar. You need to internalize this quote. We just talked about Reagan a few times, and all the speakers have alluded to this. This is your responsibility. I don't care how old you are. If you're here, you care. This is something we cannot just think that is ingrained in our blood, that we can just pass along. Every one of you has to fight for this, and we have to fight for it in every county and every city. We cannot just let our cities go just because the cities have problems. There are cities, and including our states. I tell everyone when I go to Washington or Oregon or blue states, there is no more running off to Texas. Hey, no more running off to Florida, because if you think they're not going to come for all those states, you're crazy. This is your home. Okay, we're going to fight for our homes because that's what Americans do. So do not pass up this opportunity to be engaged in the fight of your life. And without further ado, who's ready to talk about it? It was definitely a weird election to me, and North Carolina hung around for about 9 days, even though all of the indicators suggested a very large Trump victory. I analyze trends. This is important. So polling has its issues. Has anybody out there been polled in the last couple of years? I probably see a couple hands, but it's funny how you have all these respondents to polls, and it doesn't seem like anybody actually gets polled out there. The issues with polling is this. First off, the people conducting the polls are biased. And then the people responding to the polls, there's something called social desirability bias, where you may be somebody who's not eager to share your political preferences with a stranger because you're worried that you're not going to tell the stranger what he wants to hear. So this results in I'm undecided or I'm voting for the other guy. And it also results in 43 to 39 kind of polls, which leaves 18% undecided, but still allows the media to say so-and-so is going to win by 4 points. And polls are also used to lead you to an expectation of a certain outcome. So, of course, most of the polls in North Carolina were tight, or they had Biden up by 2 or 3 points. Although every number I'm going to show you suggests that that is the most crazy line of thinking you'll ever see. So let's look at these trends. The blue line represents the Democrat votes. You can see the numbers off on the left, and the red line represents Republican votes. In 2004, there you have it. George Bush with a 12.5-point win in North Carolina in his reelection. And then you have a very strong upward trend for the Democrats. That is a gain of 617,000 votes for Obama from 04 to 08, which is staggering. That's even higher than what we just saw. But 617,000 votes. McCain with a very modest gain. One of the things I measure is population growth. There is no formula for population growth. This is just a left-right limit for me to assess the nature of a state. And in that decade, North Carolina grew by 1.5 million residents. You're told, because of the turnout for Biden and, of course, Trump, that the reason for that was population growth. Well, North Carolina's growing, Texas is growing, Florida's growing, Arizona's growing. North Carolina only grew by 900,000 in the past 10 years, according to the latest census, which is probably a little bit rigged against red states, but it grew much more in the previous decade. So I'm kind of curious about how these have trended. And now, I told you Obama was one of the weakest candidates for re-election of all time, and you see it in the trend line. You can see with the population growth and with his incumbent status, he only gained 36,000 votes in his re-election in North Carolina. The registration trends in this state went in favor of Republicans from 08 to 12, and that tipped the state back to Mitt Romney. Even though he had little appeal to the white working class in this state, but he got enough of those tax cut Republicans in your major metros to turn the state back. And then came Donald Trump. And you had large gains for Republicans, and you had losses in the voter rolls for the Democrats. And you see the Clinton line is almost flat. Only 12,000 votes gained over Obama 2012. So you have, over 8 years, just 48,000 new Democrat votes. And Trump gained 92,000, which is not much compared to what I'm going to show you. And now we see Trump with 396,000 new votes in 2020. So that is over 4 times more new votes than he gained in his first run here when he won the state by twice as much as Romney did. But Biden reversed this decline and gained nearly 500,000 new votes in North Carolina last year. 495,000 to be exact. The dotted blue line is my very generous estimate for what I would expect based on population growth, registration by party, and of course the behavior of the state, which is flatlined for the Democrats, and that is obvious in the registration, which I will show you on the next slide. The distance between the solid blue line and the dotted blue line is 257,000 votes. So my number for North Carolina is that Biden's total is 257,000 votes higher than the most generous forecast would have him coming in based on how Trump performed. And your governor was reelected by 248,000 votes. Might not have known that. All right, out there, who is a registered Republican? So your state registers voters by party. Mine does not. I'm from Texas, so I'm just a registered voter. I can go vote in whichever primary I feel like voting for. So if I want to go vote for Pocahontas for fun, I can. You probably have a number, and you may even have some current ones. Any former registered Democrats out there? Yep, I see some of you out there. So North Carolina's been a presidential red state since the 80s. There's been a gradual trend in federal elections for registered Democrats to vote Republican. And you see the same thing in Pennsylvania. And a lot of this has to do with fear of being identified by employers as registered on the party you're not supposed to vote for. But the point is, you've had a gradual conversion of old school Southern Democrats into modern day Republicans. What I'm going to show you here has to do with party registration. This is the single most accurate indicator of the trajectory of a next election. And by trajectory, I mean, if Trump won your state by 3.7% in 2016, I need to know if this is going to be bigger than that or smaller than that. So if it's smaller, then you're in danger of having the state flip. In 2004, Bush carried the state by 12.4%. The Democrats had a 13-point registration advantage in the state. 13% more Democrats than Republicans. And then what happened in the 4 years that Bush was in office for his second term? He left office with a 25% approval rating. There were 2 wars that we couldn't win. There was a financial collapse. There was the birth of the surveillance state. And he never defended himself against a media that was absolutely ruthless. And I think most of us here would probably agree that you feel embarrassed that you ever defended that man. Because I do. So what we see going from 04 to 08, reflective of what I just told you about Bush, and also in keeping with this political pendulum that generally ushers a party out of the White House after 8 years, you see a 1-point move in favor of Democrats in registration. Just 1 point. So it's now a 14-point Democrat state. And it was enough to shift the vote almost 13 points to flip the state to Obama very narrowly. So now Obama's one of the weakest incumbent presidents of all time. And you see this registration number go down 2 points in favor of Republicans. So now it's Democrats plus 12 and change percent. Romney did not actually benefit from any new Republicans on the rolls. Both parties lost voters, but the Democrats hemorrhaged voters. The first term of Obama was the end of the white working class Democrat. And that came with the emergence of the populist Tea Party. But this was enough to indicate that the state was going to move right from a very slim Obama victory margin. And it predicted the Romney win of 2 points in 2012. So North Carolina turned back to the Republican column in 2012. And then came Trump. So Trump appealed to populations that typically don't vote Republican. Now in 2016, he lost some of your soft, moderate Republicans to the third party column. But we had a 4-point move this time towards Republicans in registration. And this came with massive gains for Republicans because these are Democrats dropping off and coming into the Republican Party to ensure that Trump won the primaries. So you have this big move towards the GOP, which tells me the state will be right of 2012. And it is. And Trump wins it by almost twice the amount that Romney did, almost 4 points. So now keep this in mind. We have another 4-point move towards Republicans in the past 4 years. Does that sound like Trump didn't go over well in North Carolina to you? Because if it was going back up, if that stack on the end was higher, showing a Democrat gain, then I'm going to expect the state to move left off of 3.7. Are you guys still with me here? Good. So the state is 4 points more Republican now, a gain of over 100,000 Republicans on the rolls, and a loss of over 100,000 Democrats. And Trump barely held this state by over 1 point. The margin in North Carolina, by all indicators, should have been a minimum of 5 points and a maximum of about 8 or 9. In a 5 to 8 point election, Roy Cooper was certainly not reelected. In a 1 point election, yes. I ran out of room on the top up there. Otherwise, I would have put presidentially endorsed North Carolina heat map. So when Donald Trump calls your name out on stage, it's pretty cool. The first time it happened, I was with James Charles in Atlanta, and that was a written statement. And my phone blew up by about 30 different people. And I had just gotten busted putting a meme on my Telegram that 100,000 people thought was real. And I go in there, whenever that happens, I just delete it and I never mention it again. So that happened, and I was a little worried that the Trump statement was a gag to get me to post something stupid again. So I made a couple calls, and lo and behold, it was real. And then a few weeks later in Alabama, he called my name out from the podium. But when he calls me out, he's calling out you, those of you who are involved in the fight, trying to right this election, trying to expose the fraud, and trying to set our political system up for success. So thank you, everybody. So he called you out. Give yourself a hand. The point of these slides, at this point, I am a national asset, able to fly at a 30,000 foot level and spot that's a fraudulent county you should be going after. This one's probably not something you should burn your political capital on. And these ones right here are totally clean on trend. Now, I mentioned Orange County yesterday, and somebody gave me this look. Orange County trended clean. That doesn't mean there's not individual instances of fraud that somebody may know of, but the trends do not justify in terms of you're going to have a business case to audit that county. So I'm going to point you to the red counties, which are very obviously fraudulent, and we're going to discuss 3 of them here very shortly. Like I mentioned, New Hanover County out on the coast. We're going to talk about Guilford, and then, of course, Wake County. If you were at the event in Mecklenburg County 2 nights ago, we had Mecklenburg and Johnston in there. Last night, we had Wake in there. We had Johnston and New Hanover. So we changed it up just a little bit. Now, who's my leader for New Hanover? All right, so stand fast. We're going to go over a couple things here. We're going to start in 2004. This is going to help you understand my methodology. This is not difficult. This is much more reliable than polling. It's much more reliable than, hey, well, where were all the Biden vote rallies? Understand that these trends are the numerical expression of where the hell's all the Biden vote rallies and where's the Biden signs at. That's what this is. So if you're a conservative North Carolinian, is that how you say it? That's pretty good. You guys got to be impressed from that. I'm from south of Oklahoma. So if you're a conservative North Carolinian and you run over to Chapel Hill and you don't feel like you belong there, it seems like it's a little bit liberal. What's these crazy signs you see? That's your eyes and your ears telling you there's a trend moving in a way that you don't align with. And when you're somebody from one of those bubbles and you wind up out in far eastern North Carolina and you think that all these gun logos on the cars and Trump signs everywhere don't match your views, well, you're also detecting a trend. And as far as trends go, there are 100 counties in this state, and 93 of them trended more Republican registrations in Trump's first term. That doesn't sound like a state that should be left of Trump's 2016 performance to me. I don't know about you, but our mileage may vary. So who said they were from New Hanover County? I think we had somebody. Okay, you guys from the coast? Anybody from the coast? Okay, good. So New Hanover County. In 2004, President Bush carried this county in his reelection by about 10,000 votes, as you can see on the screen behind you. And we're going to start the progression. This is how we'll go through the two counties after this. And you're going to see going into 2008. What you're looking at here on the screen, that number in blue on the left, 3.7%, that is telling you that in 2008, the Democrats held a 3.7% registration edge going into the election. And here's the change from the previous election. So McCain adds 5,000 votes. This is a massive decade for growth. So McCain gets a population boost, but Obama goes up almost 14,000 votes. So what you need to know, this is the year Obama flipped the state. Remember 14,000. So New Hanover lead, you need to remember 14,000 when you're leading your group. And then we're going to go into 2012. So I told you, Obama was one of the weakest incumbents of all time. So if you're going to lose 4 million votes nationally, it's going to be seen at the county level. So here's what we have in 2012. First off, the county is now more Republican. It's 2.5% Democrat, so it's moved a point in favor of the GOP in registrations. What that's telling you is the margin should be tighter or bigger for the Republicans who still win this county. And what you have is a slight gain for Romney. Remember, Romney's not good with populist voters or white working class voters. He's good with your tax cut Republican who likes to vote for feels. And then we have Obama's down slightly. So Obama, despite population growth, is at almost the same exact vote total in this county in his reelection. So the margin between the candidates in terms of raw votes is larger, as predicted by the registration, and the percentage, of course, goes with it. And on the right, this is what changes were on the voter rolls. 1,500 new Republicans, barely any new Democrats, and about 13,000 total net new registered voters on the rolls. So now we move to 2016. 2016 is a big year for understanding what I call voter behavior. So if a county is bigger for Trump than it was for Romney, one of those counties that I took off for today's presentation is Johnston County. Trump blew that thing out in 2016. That means the voting base there is more populist conservative and not so much tax cut conservative oriented. And we're going to see this. So we see now the county is almost a Republican county in registration. It's under a 1% lead for Democrats. That's telling you that you're going to see a bigger number for Republicans. It's about the same because you had a lot of third-party cast-offs for Republicans, but Trump is up a couple thousand. The Democrats are up 2,000. So this is pretty much a push. You have both parties are flat pretty much in 2016. You can see the gains here for the Republicans, but now the Democrats are starting to drop voters big time. 1,500 Democrats off the rolls. And now, as we go through this, I'm going to give you half of the answer to the quiz. So as your lead over there, New Hanover lead, here's half of your answer to the quiz. We're going to watch Trump's vote gain in 2020. So there's 8,000 new votes. That is your Republican record vote gain in one election cycle. And the county is now a Republican registration county. So 1.2% more Republican than Democrat. So your state is turning into an actual Republican state. 1,200 new Republicans, 2,000 Democrats off the rolls. So this is 3,500 Democrats off the rolls in 2 cycles. Now, New Hanover lead. I need you to take 60 seconds and huddle with everybody around you and figure out this. So we have a record Republican gain, and we also have the Democrats hemorrhaging voters off the rolls. We have the county is now a Republican registration county. And here's the Democrats stuck in the same 2,000 vote tunnel for 3 elections in a row. So I would like to know, given Trump's vote total, where we could forecast Biden's vote total. So come up and see me on this stage here in about 60 seconds. Are you guys tracking me so far? Yes? No? Okay. Do we need to do some push-ups? I feel like you guys are falling asleep back there. What's that? 45 what? Okay, well, so if you guys know the certified totals, please don't yell them out. This is an important thing for forecasting. I want you guys to understand where we're going. All right, are you back there grabbing up opinions? I'll explain that. So the voter registration trend, if you are an independent voter, you're not Republican or Democrat. Now, most people that are in that are something. You know, in Maricopa County, there's a lot of Republicans that register as independent because you could look these records up and you could figure out what party somebody belongs to. But for that number and these registration trends, the only time the registration trends get bucked, and it's only slightly, is in your very large metro areas where, like Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, which is Pittsburgh, it trended 1 point Republican in 2016, but it went back. Now, it's probably cheating. But it can sometimes go back where these independents, because they're urban, might lean a little left and throw it just a little. But it's not going to be a lot. These mid-sized counties, it is absolutely bulletproof, because what happens is you show up to a cookout and everybody's got a Trump sign out there. Everybody's wearing Trump gear and you're an independent, and it's like an ocean tide. It pulls the independents with it. Same thing happened with Obama in 2008. Everybody's going for Obama, so your independents lean that way. All right, can you come on up to the stage, New Hanover lead? All right, what's your name?
Angie.
Angie, where are you from?
Wilmington.
All right, you're from the coast. That's good. I'm glad you volunteered. So what did we talk about? We talked about Trump has a record vote gain on the board. So he definitely didn't go down. He's not stuck. So that means there's fewer people rattling around to be gobbled up by the other party. You can see it's a Republican registration county now. And look, what's really bad is the Democrats are hemorrhaging voters off of the rolls. So their strength as a party is down. The Democrats are also stuck in the same 2,000 vote tunnel for 3 consecutive elections. So what did your friends over there come up with for an estimated Biden total? And you can even be generous.
50 to 51,000.
All right. So who out there thinks that low 50s is a pretty good estimate? Okay. Now you may not think it's realistic, but as far as like, let's be generous and estimate the most dangerous course of action, I say 50, 51 is pretty fair estimate. Because thank you, actually, why don't you stay up here just so you can enjoy this number? But I don't know if you'll enjoy it. You're really not going to enjoy the next 2 after this. But what we need to understand here is in military intelligence world, there are 2 courses of action the intelligence officer comes up with. The first one is called most likely course of action. So that is the Democrats are going to cheat, okay? Most dangerous course of action is they're going to cheat big time, and they're going to throw the national election over. So I'm going to go ahead and go with most dangerous course of action and go ahead and say this is going to be a total in the low 50s, even though you do see loss here, and it's possible they would lose. So 51,000 is our guess. Can I get a drum roll from you guys? Thank you. All right, I appreciate you coming up. You all right? You need some help back to the seat? That's pretty bad. All right, so what you need to know about this number, and this is the part of the show that this is really probably the closest to medieval times that I presented in. This is the part of the show where I could hear like some bagpipe go off in the back and rotten fruit be thrown up at the stage. So what's lost in this total is this is a Republican victory county this whole time, even when Obama won the state in 2008. And Trump just threw a record number of votes. when the county turned Republican and the Democrats are losing voters off the rolls, and Biden won the county by 3,000 votes. So that county, and I think I even estimated him only 10,000 over. So my most dangerous course of action is extremely lenient. So I put him in the mid 50s just for the sake of estimation. So when I tell you that it's 8 million votes over nationally, I'm very light on this. And that's still showing substantial fraud. So are you guys kind of seeing how my brain works over 3,000 counties? Okay, there will be a quiz at the end of this, especially if y'all start falling asleep. All right. Guilford County. Who's from Guilford County? I understand that High Point is in 4 different counties. Is that correct? All right, so we're going to talk about this big county here. You can see in 2004, it was pretty close. So Bush narrowly lost the county, less than 2,000 votes. And then it's pretty easy prediction that the county's going to move left in 08 because this is an 8-year move away from Republicans. And Obama being the charismatic candidate that he is with over 600,000 new votes, he has a huge gain in the county. Look at that. So you have a loss for the GOP, but you have 42,000 gain for Guilford County. So that is the record gain in Guilford. And the party registration is almost 21 points in favor of the Democrats. And now we're going to roll into 2012. So what you see here is Romney actually picked up more net new votes than Obama did. And this is one of these indicators of a large county where it went in favor of Democrats in registration, but slightly. But the independents broke nationally by 7 points for Mitt Romney, and that manifested here. So you see slight gains for both parties. You can see the Democrats are now losing voters off the rolls under Obama. Still a big Democrat win, but the Republicans cut it a little bit. 2016. The county moves slightly in favor of the Democrats, but it's still within the same 1.5 that it's been in for the last 3 cycles. You see Trump is down, as is common in some of these urban areas in 2016, and the Democrats are pretty much flat again. So you see 2 consecutive elections with all the population growth, a gain of 4,000 and a gain of 3,000. So population growth of your state does not always correlate to both parties gaining votes. Did anybody watch The Office back when it was on the air? Because I watched every episode for 9 seasons. And there was a character named Michael Scott for the first 6 who was very popular and pretty much carried the show. And as soon as he left, what happened to The Office? It went on a trend downward till they eventually canceled the show. Same thing happens to political parties when they expire. The Republican Party got new blood in 2016, which changed the dynamics of our elections in favor of Republicans nationwide. So we see here the election results in this county are almost the same 3 years in a row with little variance. And now we're going to see in 2020, Trump is up about 9,000 votes. So this is not Trump country here, but that's probably about what I would expect for a standard Republican in the county. The registration is slightly more in favor of the Republicans, but it's not because the Republicans are gaining. They're losing, and so are the Democrats. But you have a massive glut of registered net new voters on there, 18,000. This was not too bad. When I show you the next county, you're going to question the validity of your registration rolls. All right, where's my volunteer for Guilford County? You in the front? Okay, so what we're looking at is we're looking at a county that hasn't changed much since 2008 in its political principles. The registration is a little bit in favor of the Republican Party because of the addition of independent voters, but it's a semi-urban environment here. And you can see the Republican totals largely it's in the same 10,000 votes for 12 years. But the Democratic column, once Obama had the huge boom, it's really stuck. So with a gain of 10,000 votes in the Republican column, I need you guys to figure out where we can expect that Biden total to be. And then come on up here, about 60 seconds. How'd you end up with what? Well, I think you know the answer. I mean, that's what we're talking about up here. But there's no evidence of election fraud. Most secure, cleanest, best, most American, for the good of the world election. All right, want to come on up? We had an all-volunteer military. We have an all-volunteer election fraud force. All right. What is your name?
Gina,
Gina, where are you from?
Guilford County.
All right. So we have this. Hang on just a second. So we have our model here for Guilford County. Not a lot of change in the political dynamics of the county. The registration values are within the same couple percent for 4 consecutive cycles. The Republicans are at a standard Republican output because this is definitely not Trump country. And we see the Democrats are stuck in the 140s for 3 consecutive elections. And they've also lost registered voters going into 2020. So what did your team estimate for Biden's total with Trump being at a decent gain?
152.
152. So ballpark is 150s, low 150s. And drum roll, please. So my estimate on Guilford was generous. I only had him 10,000 over. It's probably higher than that, but I put 10,000 down on Guilford. All right. Thank you, Gina. Who's ready for Wake County? Because this is a very large county we're going to talk about. And I hope that none of you have eaten barbecue recently. Wake County is going to give you guys some problems. It may actually keep you up, and it may actually wake you up if you're asleep back there. 2004 is a special year for Wake County. This is the last time a Republican nominee carried the county. See, Bush got it by about 7,000 votes. The county was barely hanging on, but that's a re-election kind of push for Bush. And then in 2008, here's what we have. The county is 11.6% more Democrat than it is Republican. You can see you have a population gain for McCain of about 10,000 votes. And of course, you have a huge gain for Obama. Huge gain. This is 81,000 votes for Obama, net new gain. That's how you wind up flipping a 12-point Republican state in one cycle. Then in 2012, so the county is trending slightly Republican. Now remember, Romney picked up the independents nationally by 7 points. So with a gain in Republican registration like that, even a slight one, you're going to see this margin tighten. So Romney picks up more net new two-party votes than Obama did in 2012 in this county. So the vote margin is tighter between the two candidates, and so is, of course, the percentage. Here's what came out of the rolls. 5,500 Republican, 11,000 Democrat, 61,000 total voters. So this is clearly a very fast-growing county. But it went more favorable for the GOP in 12 than it did in 08. Now, Trump, 2016, same stuff we saw in Guilford County. Because of the addition of 50,000 net new voters, most of them being non-affiliated, we see a slight move towards Republican registration. But who sat out the election on? Most of them sat out were Republican and third party. We have 196,000 Trump votes, which is down 15,000. We have a Democrat gain of about 35,000 votes. So we had a gain for Obama of 81, then 17 and 35. So the peak of the Democratic Party is 2008, almost everywhere in the United States. And since that peak, we're looking at 17,000 or 16,000 and then 35,000. So now we're going to see how 2020 turned out. Half of the quiz. Trump goes up 30,000 votes. That's pretty good. I think looking at where Romney was in 12 and going to 2020, so you have a 2% move towards Democrats. So what I'm going to assess is a bigger margin for the Democrats. So this is going to be more votes. But Trump's total looks about like a standard Republican output in this county. I think that he's your standard Republican here, not necessarily Trump blowing it out in Johnson County. 25,000 new Democrats. Republicans are down a little bit. But now we have almost double as many voters to the rolls in 2016, which one of the biggest issues. Who saw the canvass results from Maricopa County? Voter rolls are a huge problem. There were canvass results from Florida put out a couple days ago. I put them on my Telegram channel. About 10% of registrations in Florida are phantom registrations. So these voter rolls are filthy. They didn't trend that way in the last 4 years. You saw Republican blowouts, but they're not clean from decades ago. That is why you have, even though we make a joke about it, that's why you have voters that are born in the 1800s. So Wake County lead. I need you to consider a slight move towards Democrats in registration, giving you a likely bigger margin in 2020. But you do have 30,000 new Trump votes out there. So it's a pretty decent performance. I need to know, given a gain of 17,000 and 35,000 in the last 2 cycles for Democrats, where the Biden total is. And please come see me in 60 seconds. Is my volunteer back there? We had this exercise on Mecklenburg County a couple nights ago. The results are the audible gasp and the rotten fruit flying up the stage is going to remind you, it's going to be reminiscent of what we talked about in Meck County. All right, so what's your name?
My name is Barbara.
Barbara, where are you from?
I live in Cary. Whoa. I'm going to fall
Right.
off the stage.
All right, everybody give Barbara a hand.
Thank you.
And please let Barbara get off the stage before you start throwing stuff up here. So what do we have? We have a 2-point move towards Democrats. So let's go ahead and be generous and estimate a larger margin for them in percentage and raw votes. Trump is up 30,000. That's pretty good. He looks at a normal Republican number. But since the huge gain in 2008, the Democrats have pretty much been predictable, 17,000 and 35,000. We have a baseline for votes we should assume that they're going to gain. So where do you think Biden's vote total comes in at 2020 with Trump's number being known?
We think it would be 325,000.
Who's down with that? 325. 393. So if 325 is our number, that number is 68,000 over. My number was 35,000 over. So you can see that I'm a pretty generous estimator. Now, do you see the problem with this when you have 100 counties in your state? Mecklenburg County is one of them. Brunswick County is another one. Forsyth County. Iredell County. This stuff adds up. Now, does anybody know a senator named Edwards in your state? So he's from Henderson County. He's got Henderson, part of Buncombe County, and he's got another one. Did I say that right? Buncombe? I was in Georgia, and I mispronounced Coweta County. I said Coweta, like I'm supposed to know that. So, all right. So, Waukee County. We have 393,000 over. You could run back if you want to. We'll get out of the way of the fruit. So, 100 counties in the state. 257,000 votes determined this way, determined exactly like this. I looked at every single one of these. I slept 4 hours a night for about a month pulling this off. And I'm going to identify these targets for you. So we can't just look at this stuff and move on. And we have to focus locally. Wake County GOP is actually very active. I've met a number of members of the Wake County GOP that are absolutely in agreement with that. I even met a registered Democrat last night, and she's not an old school registered Dem that votes Republican. She's a Democrat. And she is one of few, apparently, who has absolutely taken a red pill on election integrity. And she submitted a lot of information and evidence to me yesterday. So there are some people out there that are willing to talk about stuff that they know. But action items. Why is it 257,000? You should know that. That's because my estimate for excess Biden votes in the state is 257,000, which if you take that off, then you have a Trump number of over 6% in your state, which looks about right in recent trends. The first thing you need to know, because we're going to hear how important 2022 is. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. Most important one. We got to move on from 2020. Do we need to move on from 2020? This is not poor sportsmanship. This is the foundation of what our country is, self-determination. We are not moving on from 2020. So when you hear from candidates, every one of you needs to press them. Where do you stand on the 2020 election? Well, Trump won North Carolina. Well, that's not the point. How much was he supposed to win it by? Okay, how did that impact your AG and your Secretary of State, your governor, your state house, your state senate, your city councils? All of this was impacted down ballot. All of it was. This literally changed the course of your school boards and your city council members all the way down to the dog catcher. Right, this is a serious issue. And that's the only issue there is, because if we don't have clean elections, we're wasting our time. Now, number two, I always usually ask this question at the beginning, but I usually call for a show of hands of veterans and first responders and nurses and EMTs. And then we get into just good old fashioned Americans, moms and dads and grandparents and patriots. And by the end of that, everybody's standing up, raising their hand, giving themselves a round of applause. You're all free people, okay? People say the same thing to me that they say to Jack. It's like, well, make sure you don't get whacked. Look, I'm reading you and analyzing to you government certified vote totals that don't make sense. All right, you're all free people, so never be afraid to stand up and speak about this stuff. Because I was born a free person, and I'm planning on dying a free person. So when we're talking about that one key issue, election integrity, and there's a second one, a very close second one, which in my opinion is if your Republican candidates, conservative candidates, don't want to stand for election integrity or medical freedom, gone. They're gone. This is a no questions asked environment. And this is something that we need to think about. So if you're a Republican, then you know already what the Democrats believe. They're very honest in this regard about how they feel about your civil liberties, your ability to make your own decisions. They don't think you have the ability to make your own decisions. So they tell you very clearly what they think about personal freedom. But the biggest enemy there is to our freedoms is the enemy inside the wire, which is the Rhino Republican Party. And I was going to call out, well, I already called out Senator Edwards, who I know his sister, who emailed me and CC'd her brother and said, "Dear brother, please listen to this guy. Please listen." No response. And 100,000 people came after him, and there's still no response. So you have a lot of your Republican reps that absolutely deserve to be thrown out of office. And I forgot, because he's such an insignificant person in this state, because he's not a leader, he's an empty suit, your Republican Party chairman, Michael somebody. All right. Look, you need to put that guy on notice that we are no longer going to tolerate these rhinos. So leading into that final point, we need to stop that conversation every time Republicans are on the outside or conservatives are on the outside looking in. Who do we need to primary? You need to think about primarying absolutely everybody. Hey, and then on your second pass through, like a Passover, hey, this guy's good on election integrity. This guy's good on medical freedom. We'll put him back in. Everybody else is out until further notice. Every single one of you, we could grab all of you and throw you down in the Capitol, in the state legislature, and you would do a better job governing your state than these clowns who don't care about your stolen. This is the civil rights issue of our time, and they don't want to call it that. So with that said, unless we want to unhide about 400 slides, I'm going to cut this one loose. So I want you all, if elections is your issue, continue on. If it's something else, find it. Find your sea legs and get about doing it. Okay, we cannot sit here. The hour in this republic is late. It is a late hour. But you're alive for this time for a reason. It was not an accident that you're here in 2021. I want you to look to your left, look to your right, look at your neighbors. And if you're feeling afraid, you're going to find somebody around you that is not afraid, that is acting, that is doing something, whether that is something great or small. Okay, you're all making changes, but only if you step out with faith. Okay, use your talents, find out what it is that you do better than everyone else you know, and get to doing it. And I'm telling you, that act of faith, God is going to put you in the position that He wants you in. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your attention. And thank you most of all for what you're going to do when you leave here.